Everybody will get the disclaimer. And then let's spotlight. Perfect. Spotlight. There we go. Me and Chris. All right, let's do this. Share the screen, and you guys should be able to. Leslie, you give me a thumbs up. Chris, you give me a thumbs up too if you can see the PowerPoint screen. Awesome. Perfect. All right, guys, let's get started. I'm excited to have everybody here. I'm excited for our fireside chat. And so let's get started. So much energy. All right, so I want to welcome you guys all to our Amplifying Black Mentorship Utilizing Technology fireside chat featuring founder and CEO of Mentor Spaces, Chris Motley. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of our chapter and the National Black MBA, and then we'll get started with our presentation, our fireside chat, and our presentation. So house rules, before we get started, I'm going to give you some house rules. So everybody should be muted, and I'm asking that you remain on mute until we get to the Q&A session. When we get to Q&A, we can come off of mute, you can come off of the camera if you want to at any time, but stay on mute. If you have any questions during the fireside chat, make sure you post them in the chat. We'll take a look at them and we'll answer them when we have the time during Q&A. And if we have some extra time during the fireside chat, we'll make sure we answer them as well. And again, if you have your video on, I ask that you keep the video on during the presentation as it is being recorded and we don't want to be distracting. If it's off, we just ask that if you do have a question and you feel comfortable turning it on during the Q&A session, feel free to turn it on. And yeah, that's about it. Chris would love to see faces. All right, so our agenda for today, this is the welcome housekeeping. I'll go over a brief overview of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the Black MBA. We'll go into the fireside chat with me, the moderator, and Chris Motley. We'll do a live view of Mentor Spaces with Chris. And we'll do Mentor Spaces user testimonial featuring Leslie Fisher, our wonderful mentor and member of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter. We'll do a Q&A session, and then we'll go into the closing. So brief overview of who we are. So the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the National Black MBA is a volunteer-ran 501c3 organization. We cover all of the Northern California region, which includes Fresno, Monterey County, Bay Area County, Santa Clara, Alameda, Costa Contra, and the Sacramento County. So we're a huge region. We have approximately 400 members, active members, and we have a local network of over 4,000 supporters. So I would like to thank you all for being here, whoever's a supporter, whoever's a member. We are extremely grateful for you and thank you for your support. So our chapter hosts year-round programming and events to support our members in their educational and career aspirations, and we expose members to new topics, ideas, and trainings. Our mission and vision align with the national organization. And I just want to acknowledge our chapter leaders and again, our members and our donors who helped us build this path to excellence. And if you didn't know already, my name is Maisha Robertson. I am the president of the National Black MBA San Francisco Bay Area chapter. And just a little bit of background about our national chapter. So our national organization was conceived in 1970 to help Blacks come to the corporate sector, mainly for the first time, share experiences and insights to help make the journey easier. By nurturing these new professionals, the organization helped early members navigate and ultimately succeed in unfamiliar and frequently challenging environments. Our national mission is to lead in the creation of educational, wealth building, and growth opportunities for those historically underrepresented throughout their careers as students, entrepreneurs, and professionals. All right, so let's get into today's event. As you know, we have 5 channels of programming, and this particular program is under our Entrepreneurship channel of programming. And so throughout the year, we would do different programming around career education, entrepreneurship, leadership, and we'll have events for lifestyle, such as our social events and our networking events. So I'm excited to do this entrepreneur programming today. And I would like to get started with one thing from Chris. I would like him to introduce himself. So tell us who you are and a little bit about you before we get started.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Maisha. It's super cool to be here. And I'm going to try to match your energy. Like, I feel like you just woke up and I'm like, I've been working for 12 hours. But so if you could send me a text message or some energy, much appreciated. But hello, everybody. My name is Chris Motley, founder and CEO of Mentor Spaces, which is a mentorship platform designed to make it easier for people to advance their careers through the power of mentorship. Our business is really innovating how companies recruit and identify pipelines for their organizations, and mentorship being a way to cultivate those pipelines. So I'll stop there, and then unless you ask me some more questions, and we'll dig right in.
Okay. I have questions. All right, let's get into the fireside chat. I'm excited to speak to Chris because I spoke to Chris a couple times already, and I think he's absolutely amazing in what he has, and what he built is just like really needed in our community. So this is like really exciting for me. So first, I want to talk about your journey to entrepreneurship. So how did you begin this journey, and like what led you to found Mentor Spaces?
Well, to me, I think it's more of a mindset of wanting to improve a situation, and it sort of developed on itself. So I think my first entrepreneurial venture, this is actually not one. Well, this is my first one. I'm from Chicago, and every winter it would snow really bad. And if I went to school, I did an after school activity. So when I get home, everybody's driveways and things like that will be shoveled, and then sidewalks and things. So I literally lied to my mom. It was just like, oh, it's like I made up a holiday. It's Teachers Institution Day. And I don't have to go to school today. And then the whole day I went to house and charged them $5 to shovel their snow. So when all my friends came back from school, the whole neighborhood is pristine, clean. But I think that's probably the first earliest memory of entrepreneurship, and just, which is all about helping other people. At the end of the day, you're solving someone else's problem. And then it sort of translated and sort of elevated to being a barber. In high school, I went to this boarding school and far away from the hood that I grew up in, and I didn't know who was going to cut my hair. And so I saved up my allowance and bought some clippers, and it took 3.5 to 4 times before I didn't look like a complete moron. But that was my second business. But I think that the theme in all of this was I just really enjoyed solving problems and then being rewarded for solving problems. And so I you ask about mentor spaces, and a lot of stuff has happened in my career, but I'll talk about a few important things. I was a part of this program called A Better Chance, which I'm sure some of you all on this call were part of as well. All these organizations were super important. They still are to this day. But through that alumni network, I met someone who happened to be working at Goldman Sachs, and which meant nothing to me at the time. And I asked him, what did he do? And he said, I'm a trader. And I thought he said traitor. So I'm like, what do you mean? And he kind of realized that I did not hear that language before in terms of being a trader. And then he explained to me, he said, well, basically I buy stuff for a low price and I sell it for a high price. Now, I started off by saying I grew up in Chicago. So I immediately look at this guy, I'm like, that's legal? You buy low, sell it high. And then he went on to explain to me what a career in trading was. And that was sort of where everything clicked, and understanding the career path that I would have otherwise not discovered. And so I worked 5 years, almost 5 years at Goldman. I was a commodities trader, and had a wonderful experience there. But then I started to get this entrepreneurial itch again of like, how much money did I make this company this year? And how much did they pay me? And you can't compare it to like your teacher friends, right? Because they're, it's a whole different ballgame. I'm looking at it in terms of how much tangible value I created and what they paid me, which happened to be a lot of money, but not as a percentage of what I made them. And that was the beginning part of saying, man, wouldn't the person who built Goldman, he probably made a lot more, right? So anyway, the point is I started to think about how to use entrepreneurship in a more direct way, and finding an opportunity to, basically take or be rewarded more of the upside of the value you're helping to create. And I started a number of different businesses, one in manufacturing, where we built a manufacturing company in West Africa. And we basically were selling scrubs and patient gowns, basically these high commodity apparel goods, because there was a duty rate advantage between importing from certain countries in Africa versus importing from China or Pakistan or all these other places. And we did millions of dollars of revenue with people like Walmart and Centos and Aramark. And that was like, I made it because it was this idea on the back of the napkin. And all of a sudden, we became one of the largest employers in Ghana. And people, literally were selling bags of water on the street in these sort of informal economy to like having an ATM card and making apparel that is being exported to Walmart. And so that was really, really cool. But in manufacturing, 100 things have to go right to make this much money. I guess if you're like making microchips or something like that at that time, it was much more lucrative. So I started thinking about how to use technology to still create opportunity for other people, but doing it in a way that had a lot better economics. And I won't bore you with all the mistakes that have happened along the years and all the things that I've learned, but that eventually turned into going back to a very personal experience of saying, wait, well, how did I navigate this sort of career path, mostly very serendipitously? And so just go back to that moment and now apply technology to that same process. And maybe we'll have a shot at doing something great. And so that's where we are now with Mentor Spaces. But, I start off by saying it's all a mindset, whether you're an employee at a company or you're the boss of your own company, you still have people you report to, boards, investors, what have you, customers. It's just that mindset of, how can you make something better? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what innovation is making something better. And strip away all the fancy business school speak and keep it 100 and be like, yeah, how do you make this better? And is that defensible? And, does it have good economics? And if those things tend to come together, it could be a good result for everybody involved.
So it's you had a lot of entrepreneurship experience. Did you even have an idea of like what you wanted to be when you were younger? Was it an entrepreneur, or did you have another path that you wanted to take?
Success. I wanted to be successful.
I love it.
Like it was that, and what happens is it's a function of your options, right?
Yes.
It's sort of like, if you've been to a buffet the first time and you've never been to a like old country buffet, this was like my thing when I was growing up. Like I would puke thinking about that food today. But back then it was like, but when you are exposed to more options, your opinions about things change really, really quickly. You know what I mean? And so I think that, when I was exposed to only being a doctor or being a lawyer, I hate blood. So I was like, I guess I have to be a lawyer. And then you see some movies, and business is not really that clear in certain movies, but I saw Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. And I was like, oh, that seems like a lot of fun. And it was not an intentional thing. It was just a movie that I had seen. I never knew that would be my job 20 years later or whatever it was, 25 years later. So I think it was just a function of the more things I became exposed to, combined with the experiences that I had up until that point, you start to think of different opportunities. It's funny. I joke with my friends. I'm like, I'm so amazed at people like rappers who can just spit on the drop of a dime and they could just keep going. Like they'll like talk to you as they're rapping and they're like, you want me to stop now, right? and it's so amazing to me. But what I like to think about it from an entrepreneurship perspective, again, just having that mindset, it's almost the same exact thing. It's like, I can't do that, but I can unpack a business model real quick. And I can come up with all these sort of ideas. And it's cool to sort of recognize that, again, the more things you're exposed to and the more access you have to people who can sort of enhance your exposure, it just opens up more opportunities.
Right. Like when we talked earlier last week, it was like a conversation we had about like experience and it matters, and being exposed to what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. Like if you're never exposed to it, you 100%. Don't know. Yeah, so that's
100%.
like a lot like I was telling you about my background. Like there's a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know about this organization. I didn't know about a lot of Black organizations growing up in Sacramento, California. You weren't exposed to these things. And so when I moved to
Yeah.
Atlanta, it was just like, bam, there's all these things, these experiences that I had. And so like I told you, like I was in the music industry at one point and then rolled over to business because I'm just like, okay, exposed here. But then I found out business was really, really great. So it's, yeah, like you said, it's just, you have to be exposed to something and that does change your mindset a lot. And the next question I did have for you, as part of your experience, was the problem solving. You mentioned that, you know, like entrepreneurship is about solving a problem. And so I wanted to talk about mentor spaces and the problem that you're solving. So what made you build mentor spaces, and what problem did you see in the, I wouldn't even say industry, just in the general world that with mentorship that you wanted to solve?
Well, lots of problems, which is what makes certain paths of entrepreneurship very hard, because the real problem isn't necessarily the first one you see. So the first problem that I saw was a lot of friction that exists in discovering career paths. And so, okay, that is a real problem, right? And then you have to go a little bit deeper and you say, well, there's just a lack of awareness of opportunities, right? So if you stopped there, well, then one conclusion would be, hey, let's build this like job matching application that, you know, just you tell us information and we'll tell you the perfect job to have, right? And we built that, by the way, and it was great. It actually worked really, really well, but nobody used it. They didn't use it at all. And nothing is worse than like putting your heart and soul, your own money and that of other people into something to build something and no one uses it. It's like worse than like making a cake and people don't like it. I'm like, all right, give me 30 minutes. I'll make you another, right? I mean, it was devastating. But, and so what you have to do is you go deeper and say, well, why is it that people are not using this? And you start talking to people. It's like classic, like just ask questions. And people, you know, Steve Jobs has this very famous quote about customers don't know what they want. And everybody always just focused on like that specific quote and not kind of the context that he was talking about. But they are really good at telling you what their problems are. And it's up to you to figure out the solution to solve that problem. And so what's interesting, and I hadn't read the mission statement of National Black in a long time until you said it and you showed the slide. And that's the problem. That's it. But if you at that time, the way I think the problem was realized, the solution are organizations like National Black MBA and Inroads and A Better Chance and MLT and all the rest, which I was a part of all of them. But now today, the problem is a lot deeper, because now the world is so flat and you can see the disparities. You can walk down the street and see disparity. I grew up in the hood. Like, everybody was poor. It's only until you're exposed to rich people that you feel inadequate about being poor, right? And the same thing happens to people, the way people think about their careers, in terms of you sort of see this opportunity, but there's no way to really access it. And if everything around you is sort of against you, it really affects your confidence.
Yes.
It really amplifies the fact that you don't know people who can help you. And that may have been the reason why, no matter how many opportunities I showed people, they didn't want to apply. They didn't want to engage because they didn't feel like they were good enough. They didn't feel like they knew people who can help them to get that opportunity. And so, big aha moment. Hard part is you got to change everything you've done. You change the problem. It's very similar to your customer. You change your customer, everything you do is different, and you have to have the discipline to do it. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business. And it's just that simple. And we've almost done it way too many times that I care to admit. But so really the problem that we saw is one among Black and brown folks is a lack of confidence and a lack of what I like to call social capital. And to be very specific about this, you know, to me, I define social capital as the advantage you get by virtue of who you know and who knows you in the context by which you know them. When you grow up in certain neighborhoods, you go to certain schools, you're a part of certain clubs, your social capital is real high. You know, we've all met those people in some of the companies that we've worked in. You're like, how did you get here? right? And they didn't know the language. I mean, you can call it privilege or whatever, but I bring it down to social capital. They knew people that gave them a distinct advantage over everyone else. And when you define that as being a problem, you say, okay, well, it's about not knowing the right people. Well, how might you know the right people? Well, you have to connect them. Well, you just can't. Well, LinkedIn's done that, and that still hasn't solved the problem, right? And so you have to sort of apply it to something that helps people sort of accomplish their goals. And we isolated mentorship, and we didn't stop with mentorship. We said, well, what the hell is mentorship, right? Like it's like this thing that people all have an understanding of, but can't really define, which also points to opportunities. And for us, we said, oh, well, mentorship is simply a conversation with someone in the know. And in the know is defined as someone who can help you accomplish your goals. And so when you're able to isolate sort of the problem and then isolate a solution that is directly related to that problem, it becomes the ingredients for a pretty good recipe. It doesn't guarantee success. It just increases the probability because there's all sorts of other things you have to think about. But for us, it's saying, oh, well, could we use technology and we ask ourselves, how might we question? So we say, well, how might we use technology to facilitate conversations with people in the know? And one thing leads to another, you ask other questions. Well, how might we find a whole bunch of people we're trying to serve at one time to scale this product? And all of these how might we questions they're like the leading indicators to what could be game-changing innovations. Did I answer your question?
You sure did. You answered a couple of my questions. That's why I love talking to you, because it all comes out. I'm like, you just talk.
I'm just freestyling. I'm just freestyling. You can have it, Khaled. It's just a freestyle.
I think you're DJ Khaled. I'll be drama, you be Khaled. We'll do it that way. So you already talked about your big aha moment, which I loved, because you mentioned that, like, in our community, Black and Brown, like, we lack that confidence. And a lot of our leadership team, we've been talking about that, and that's like what we are calling now, like, imposter syndrome. We feel like we're not good enough to be in these seats, in these roles, in these companies, but other people just apply and then they get these jobs, and that could be because of privilege. It could be just because they applied, they have the confidence, and confidence sometimes gets you where you need to go. And so for me, what I wanted to know from you there is, like, how did you connect with the National Black MBA to help the Black and Brown community with this platform?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and trust me, it was not an easy process. Well, so first, I was a part of all these organizations. So, and this is going to tie back to this. I guess Chicago. I lived in New York, I lived in Atlanta, I lived in Chicago, so I forget I've always looked at it as I'm going to the conference every year and I'm about to party. Like, I wasn't involved locally, it was at the national level. But
well, shout out to New York, Chicago,
and Atlanta. But San Francisco, you all have a warm place in my heart now. But it's kind of a funny thing when you talk about imposter syndrome, because sometimes people focus on what they don't have at the expense of what they do have. And I'll tell you this very quick story. Hopefully this recording isn't shared too broadly, but I'll tell it because I think it's super informative. So I had this idea. The idea was to create this job matching technology to get college kids jobs. And I went to all these schools and I said, hey, I'm going to build you this great thing. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I got all the top schools, like 10, 15 top schools in the country to agree to the idea. And I said, okay, you each have to write a 3-year contract, $30,000 a year, and then I'll build this thing for you, right? Because that's what all the books say you need to do, right? Go get your customers, blah, blah, blah. And long story short, all these people balked. They said, no. I'm like, but you said you wanted this thing. They're like, yeah, exactly. And I said, and you said it was going to benefit you in these ways. They said, yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, so write a check and I'll build it and we're all good. They were like, no, fast forward a year and a half, another entrepreneur, did not look like me, did the exact same thing, actually went to the exact same schools that I went to. But the difference was his dad could write $1 million check, and he didn't require those companies to those universities to do a 3-year contract. And that company is now Handshake. And true story, billion-dollar company now, right? So it doesn't matter about the idea. It starts off there, it's how you execute it. So when that happened, I'm like, okay, at this point in time, I probably raised $4 million for my company. And this was before Mentor Spaces. This was earlier iterations of trying to solve this problem of friction, which was the wrong problem. And you can ask how many Black people are helped by Handshake and give you more insight. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm like, okay, I've raised $4 million. At this point, he's raised 40, right? Then all of a sudden, they raised another 80. I'm just like, there's no way I'm a pretty confident, pretty competitive dude. I was like, there is no way that I can do this. And I just sat to myself and said, well, he's not Black. And instead of focusing on what I didn't have the rich dad who could write $1 million check. I didn't have all of these things, right, that matter in entrepreneurship, right? I had all the things that mattered to Goldman Sachs and all the other top companies, but not from entrepreneurship perspective. But I'm just like, well, I understand the Black ecosystem because I was a part of it, right? And that was the insight. And I said, well, I know the issues of inroads. I know the issues of National Black MBA. These are 50-year-old organizations that are solving a real problem, but they're doing it in ways that worked before the world became more flat. And there may be an opportunity to collaborate in a way that white entrepreneurs may not be able to do. A, because they may not even understand the ecosystem. And B, they wouldn't approach people in the ecosystem to build trust and build relationships. So that was the insight. And COVID punched everybody in the mouth, right? Then everything that happened with George Floyd and others, punched this world in the mouth. And what that did to, I think, a lot of executive directors of nonprofits is say, well, we have to respond, but we have to respond in a different way. This is a different time. I mean, we literally experienced what one generation would go through, like it's like 4 big events that would be generation defining in separate generations that we've all experienced, right? In terms of, a pandemic, the financial issues that came with that, the social issues, civil rights movement, right? It's all this stuff happening in this very compressed period of time. So when that happens, people get a little bit like squeamish and they're trying to figure out, again, how to innovate, how to make something better. And it's not lost on me that when I called the leadership of some of these organizations, National Black is one of them as well, where it was just like, your timing couldn't be better. Now, let me tell you, historically, it would be crickets. It would be no return emails, none of that, right? I'm not saying anything bad about the organizations. I'm just saying that timing, context is everything, and leadership. And folks at the organization were just like, your timing couldn't be better. This is the number one issue. We got to figure out how to solve this. Now, if I hadn't done my homework as well, I wouldn't have known that what we were building was something that nonprofit organizations aren't able to build. It's not their core competency. They're not funded to make it their core competency, right? You don't have the best engineers working at, Inroads or National Black MBA. They're going to work at all the companies we know and love. But the organization had something very valuable that's important in what we were trying to build. And it's all of you, right? The members, it's all of the corporate partners, and it's 50 years of history, right? And a trusted brand. And I'm like, okay, well, if we can build dope technology and we do it in a way where the membership is helping us build it, right? We can think about a lot of really cool things, but none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. You listen and you become really empathetic and you just iterate on the things that's not working that well. So that's how it all happened. And and there's still things we're still trying to figure out to make it happen even better. Because just think about it. Just think for 1 second. And I don't know, I'm just gonna put it out a limb. If $1 billion Black tech company comes out of this crazy idea called Mentor Spaces, what do you think that means to the organizations who would help us get there? It would be like lifetime endowments, right? Now, because I understand the ecosystem and I made them part of the innovation. It wasn't like do what the white boys do, go into a garage and tinker with some things and maybe you'll have like Google. I'm not saying Black people can't do that. I'm just saying that for me, it was this recognition that I already have assets in my DNA that I have to trust are super valuable, and not use someone else's sort of yardstick to measure my sort of competence or ability.
Right.
Sorry, that's my soapbox. I almost started to preach
totally
there.
Fine. So there was a whole album, DJ Khaled. You're good. Volume 3.
It was.
Volume 3. You were totally fine. We're here.
That's my dream. I'm gonna have a conversation with Jay. I'm just gonna be spitting his lyrics. I'm like, Jay, I just did what you did, man. I mean, you just applied it my own way. But anyway.
Okay, you talked about one of your competitors earlier, Handshake. Are there any other competitors in this same space, and how do you differ from them?
Well, so Handshake was a competitor in how we used to organize our business. It's not a competitor to Mentor Spaces. So we used to sell software to universities to connect students with jobs. And even when we tried to do it specifically for underrepresented folks, it didn't work that well because we were solving the wrong problem. So when we pivoted to Mentor Spaces, and we launched Mentor Spaces literally roughly this time last year, and we all know what was happening last year, we were just like, okay, we're in COVID. It's here. Like, we're going to have to figure out how to live with it. So mentorship from a technology perspective generally exists within the four walls of a company. So therein lies the problem. The people who need mentorship the most, you can't make a criteria be that you're already inside of the company to get mentorship, right? So to this day, there may be some people trying to copy us now because things are starting to move in the right direction. But to this day, we don't know any for-profit tech company. Those are the qualifiers, for-profit and tech company. And it's very important because I can access the capital markets very differently than like a nonprofit can, right? And I feel like nonprofits, you spend all the time raising money, and then you spend it to fund operations, and you start it over again. That's a game you can never win, right? And it's crazy to me because as I started this company, you have some people, again, who did not look like me. Why is it a nonprofit? I'm like, man, when a brother comes to you an idea that's helping other people, you gotta relegate me to a nonprofit. Really? Right? I'm like, okay, how much money do companies spend recruiting Black folks every single year? How much are they paying to put their logo at a conference every year? National Black MBA can tell you that to the penny, right? And it's like a 2 or 3 day thing, very valuable. Well, what if companies can nurture and cultivate relationships on a continuous basis, but the people they say they want to hire? I'm sorry, that don't sound like a nonprofit to me, right? And so the point is that there aren't companies that we know of that are using mentorship as a strategy to build pipelines to organizations in the recruiting scenario. Most of our competitors exist within an organization, and that has all sorts of problems. Google has their own competency model, and LinkedIn has their own competency model, meaning that if you go in there with mentorship technology, they're going to tell you how your technology needs to work. But if everybody, a whole market is saying, we can't find Negroes, excuse my flippant nature, even though they're right in front of them the whole time, well, it's much easier from a customer acquisition standpoint to say, here you go, right? No, you don't tell me how this works. This is my innovation and my teams. And at the end of the day, you have to talk to someone, right? Like, how many times, Maisha, do you have to tell somebody, this is what National Black MBA is about? This is how it was created. They have a conversation with you, and they learn something about the organization much more in a more powerful way than if they read it on a pamphlet somewhere. Right? Conversations are super powerful. So if you want to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in organizations, then facilitate conversations with people external to that company, so that they, just like me 20 years ago, a little bit more than that now, when I hear somebody say Goldman Sachs, I had a conversation to understand what that was. And the rest is history, right? Like, that one conversation has built everything that I've built up to this point in time, right? And I'm still young. It's a lot of stuff to do, So the other thing I'll say, especially for some of the entrepreneurs, is that you have to think about competition in so many different ways, which makes this game so hard. It's like those direct competitors, but really it's now a scramble for people's time, right? So competition is who's capturing attention. And it's reasons why Instagram and TikTok and whatever else, I don't use all that stuff, but it's reasons why they capture attention. So what I'm trying to say is that it provides hints as to how you need to build a solution if you are trying to capture attention away from those products, right? If you're building something, it's a great idea, but you don't think about building a user experience the way that Instagram obsesses about every pixel, you're probably not going to be successful, right? And again, that's why you have to structure this as a for-profit entity that can access the capital markets in a way where you can hire the dopest developers and the dopest designers to say, that pixel is off. We're changing that because more people are going to press this button, right? And just think about it. You have something rooted in social media to the native mobile device. All of these things are all answering your question. The traditional legacy mentorship platforms, they're anchored to the enterprise. So they can't build, great user experiences in a way that you can if you're not anchored to the device, to the enterprise. One example of that, I love studying this stuff, but Slack is a phenomenal example of this, in that they built something that was they were not the first chat app. I used to use this company called Yammers, I think, back in the day when I was at Goldman. They had tons of them. Yeah, exactly, right? But Slack, they did two things. One, they built the user experience for a consumer. They matched their user experience to the best app you can use today. That's number one. Number two, most of the time, if you're selling to the enterprise, you had to be on premise. And Slack was like, no, we're in the cloud. This is how you access it. Here are our security protocols. And that made them extremely nimble. And we all know what happened, right? And so my point is, in all of this stuff, when you think about competition and you think about differentiation, the answer changes depending on who you're talking to. If I'm talking to the head of IT at a Fortune 500 company, I'm talking about competition, it's a different answer. If I'm speaking to someone who I'm trying to hire to lead sort of community, it's a different answer, because the things that sort of amplify the differentiation are different and are attractive to different audiences.
Right. So now we're going to go into the platform, because I want you to talk a little bit about the platform.
I just talked all this about user experience. You're like, well, show me this user experience.
So it's perfect segue right into this. Let's see this platform now, Chris.
You like spit right now. Spit right now. I want 16 bars.
Right into it. So do you want me to let Randy, or do you want to go ahead and pull it up? Because you have share screen capability.
Yeah, I have share screen. All you have to give me share the ability to share. Give me the magic wand.
And now.
Awesome. You love when technology works. So I'm going to assume you all could see my screen.
Thumbs up from Leslie, yes.
Thumbs up from Leslie. So to give context, right? The whole purpose and the goal of Mentor Spaces is to help facilitate conversations with people in the know. That's how we define mentorship. So when someone comes into the app the first time, they give us a little bit of information, takes like 35 seconds or so. And the whole idea is to provide instant visibility to people who are where you want to be, who can potentially give you advice on getting there. So after I've kind of gone through the onboarding process, I'm on recommended mentors. And so in this particular use case, this is someone who's logged in, who's interested in mobile design. And so they see themselves reflected in the application, super important, why people wouldn't think about that, in terms of where you want to be. So one of the core actions as it relates to who we define as mentors, and is really based on their lived experiences, you can follow them. So as the mentors sort of engage in the application by sharing resources, sharing jobs, answering questions, sharing perspectives, if you are following them, you get that, right? So you're using these same similar design patterns before a more noble purpose. Not hating on Twitter. The second area you'll see are spaces. So spaces are effectively groups, and they're groups focused on areas of functional expertise that mentors lead. So when we think about mentors, it really is a person with a shared who has a lived experience. And so all of you can play both the role of a mentee and a mentor depending on the subject matter. For those of you who just got into business school, for example, well, you may not be an expert business person, but you're an expert in getting into that school. And that is extremely valuable to someone trying to be where you are. So this bi-directional nature of who is a mentor and a mentee, it's not regimented. It's just a role that we play, right? For those of you who are married, sometimes you the boss, and other times you are not. And you have to be flexible if you want to stay married, right? So that's the second area that you see.
Nice.
And then the third area you see is what we call mentor sessions. And so you see this design pattern a lot in a few apps. Probably the most popular one is Clubhouse. In terms of how do you facilitate conversations. Now, there's a lot more structure in the way we do this, but not too much structure where it just becomes an unpleasurable experience. And really what this is about is that the mentors will lead a session, just like, you can say that I'm a mentor talking about entrepreneurship to however many people is on this line. And it's beneficial to people who are interested in entrepreneurship. That's mentorship too. Right? Because I may have said one thing that may be the reason why you pursue your idea, and that can change everything for you. So conversations are super important. It's kind of like my thing. But there are certain people who have goals that require a little bit more precision. And so if I go over to the mentor tab, you have opportunities to connect one-on-one with people to talk about more specific goals you're trying to accomplish. This is something that was requested by a number of our community members. And so I don't even want to say the number, but let's just say a high six-figure number is being invested in making this even better than what it is right now. But the whole idea is that when we started to ask the question of why aren't you applying to these jobs we're showing you, what we basically derived from all those conversations was, I just want to talk to somebody first. Right. And so it didn't start off by saying, I need a mentor. Nobody tells you like the solution. They tell you I just want to talk to someone. So when we kind of make this connection that mentorship is basically a conversation with someone in the know, that gave us sort of this frame of reference to sort of couch everything in. So we do recommended mentors. We'll do things like searching and filtering and things like that. And everybody has multiple goals. So maybe someone, is trying to get that promotion at their job, but at the same time, they're trying to develop their sort of real estate business on the side or real estate investing on the side. And so one of the things that we try to adjust for is the fact that a single person can have 5 or 6 goals at one time, which implies at least 5 or 6 people you need to talk to. So this whole notion that you have to have this continuous long-term relationship with someone who may only be useful for one conversation we're trying to debunk that. And you know what? I'll say this, I think about everything in terms of relationships. There are some people that just, hanging out one time is great. There are other people, it's like, this is probably a year or two. And there are other people you're like, I need to hold on to this for life, right? And having that flexibility in the way you approach folks who can help you, I think will give us as people of color a competitive advantage, because you're not limiting yourselves by this sort of mindset or thought process that there's just one person who's just going to always pour into you and then you're going to be successful. It rarely happens like that. And these are sort of the things we sort of built into the user experience in terms of identifying people who can help you and doing it instantly. One of the ways we do this, and I'll just say, is that, again, going back to this Black ecosystem, right? Every large company has an employee resource group. For those of you guys who work at large companies, connect me to your employee resource group, because basically you get all the Black folks in your organization who are disconnected from one another, except in that employee resource group. And they are certainly disconnected from people who have the same roles across companies in this country. If I'm a Black trader at Goldman Sachs, it is in Goldman Sachs' best interest for me to know who the other Black traders are on Wall Street, because we will sharpen iron right? I don't want to leave and go to Morgan Stanley. I want to be better at Goldman. And so facilitating connectivity among people who share your same, as peers, your same role, as well as those who have experience is also super valuable. So I spend a lot of time, and I want you guys to pick up on this. I'm not talking about all these features and functionality and things like that, because that stuff you can just put some money into that and build that in a few weeks or whatever it is. But I really wanted you all to have an understanding of our thought process. And it really comes down to the point that a person can't be who they haven't seen. And I need to probably amend my quote. It's not my quote, but it's like a person can't be who they haven't seen and talked to because the conversation is also important as well.
Yeah.
Because you can read all you want about me, but until we're having a conversation like this, you would never really grasp what you could read elsewhere. And that's the magic we're trying to unlock with Mentor Spaces. With the help of my
I totally love this app. Volume 4, DJ Khaled. I totally love this app. So I'm a big fan of this app. And I want to acknowledge one of our, let me spotlight her, I'm multitasking. I want to acknowledge one of our members and mentors on Mentor Space, Leslie Fisher. I want to give her some time to let us know about her experience on the app and how she got paired with some of her mentees. And I have one of the mentees spotlighted on my screen, so we'll chat in a second. But go ahead, Leslie, tell us about your experience with Mentor Spaces.
Okay, so first of all, I'm Leslie Fisher, and I am a member of the San Francisco chapter of the National Black MBA Association, and I'm also on the Entrepreneur and Business Development Committee. In addition to that, I have started a consultancy called L2 Diversity, and I focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion with a concentration on closing the gap for Black and Brown people. So this Mentor Spaces is totally in my wheelhouse. I experienced what it's like to go through and set up a mentorship program with my clients. And to add on to the benefits that Chris has already mentioned, another thing that my clients want to use it for and why it's important to have mentors outside of the company is they want to give back to community. So this is another way to do that. And one thing that I advocate in my practice is to build those cross-cultural awareness through having those conversations, through engaging in relationships. And mentorship is a great way to do that. So when I saw that National Black MBA Association was doing this, I think I was probably one of the first people to jump on it. I met a couple of the people.
I remember your name.
I think you were too.
I think I signed up a couple of times. I was so enthusiastic about it. And so once I applied and I started to hear back from people, I signed up for my first mentor, met with a couple of people from the organization who checked in and kind of got a sense of what my capacity was to take on more mentors. And I remember being like, oh, I've got so much going on. I can't take on any more mentors. And then I found myself, taking on a couple of other mentors because I wanted to get that connection. I wanted to get to know, actually a couple of my mentees are on the call, and a couple of them I work with. So as part of National Black MBA Association. So it's a great way to get to know them, for them to get to know me, and to give back as well, and to build that pipeline, as Chris was saying, hugely important. So I am now working with Mentor Spaces to project manage and get the experience, optimize the experience for onboarding the San Francisco chapter. And then this will be used as kind of a prototype for rolling out to the rest of the National Black MBA Association. And I also have a vested interest in my own business and getting my clients on board too. And they're totally interested in doing this, by the way. So I'm incredibly excited about it. And just a plug, if you guys have questions, comments, feedback, please post it in the chat window. I'd also like to reach out to Candice Kelly, who's the head of the Entrepreneur and Business Development Committee on San Francisco chapter. and would like to get a sense of what your experience was like as well.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Candice Kelly. Thank you, Leslie, for just sharing your background with us. And as a co-director of the Entrepreneurial and Business Development Committee for the San Francisco Bay Area chapter, we're just so lucky and fortunate to have Leslie be a part of just spearheading, the inner workings of this rollout. And really quickly, thank you, Maisha, for organizing this, for leading us. And Chris, your time, this conversation, I'm loving it. And I'm a big fan of mentor spaces. So I, like Leslie, was right on board when it was first, like the day that the national organization rolled out the click here, sign up with your LinkedIn information. I did it that day. So I've been on board for a little while now. And again, big fan. My perspective coming in, although I've been in corporate for over 20 years, my perspective, or the hat that I'm wearing right now, is as an entrepreneur. And that is why we really kind of embrace this first before, again, the chapter, because we saw just the need for the Entrepreneurship Committee to have something to help facilitate those of us who, were business owners, developers, and needing to reach back and help others, as well as needing mentorship ourselves for going to another level and expanding. So that's my hat, and I'm here for all of this. And again, thank you for allowing me to just share and share my experience with you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Candice.
So we've got
I
one.
have to just say, it's so nice to hear that. But I also want to say, this is just the beginning, and it's not public yet. But I'm telling you, I think we're both family. It's only 23 people, or whatever it is, because of the partnership with National Black MBA and one other organization. We were able to raise $2.5 million of venture capital money, which I'm investing in all of this, right? And this is how it works. And so, people thought I was stupid by going to nonprofits don't have any money. Nonprofits have influence. This is everybody has value. It's your job to figure out what that value is. And so from a pure entrepreneurship perspective and how it plays out, I just thought it so important to mention this stuff because, again, none of this happens alone. And I think going back to this imposter syndrome point, there are so many assets we have that we've been taught not to value. And it's just wrong, right? It's our legacy, right? I mean, it's no surprise that I trademarked and used "Lift as you climb" as a part of our brand. Now, all the Black folks on this call know exactly where that comes from, right? But someone who didn't have that sort of legacy bestowed upon them would never thought to do that, right? Now, who knows how effective it's going to be, but I think it speaks to people in a very deep way, like the other big quotes that I can't trademark, like "a mind is a terrible thing to waste," right? We've all heard that a few times. But Leslie, I'll turn it over to you, I guess, as question time.
Yes. So one question I have is, what is the incentive for mentors to provide their time and knowledge to mentees? Having expertise doesn't mean they are willing to share it.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And so there's a lot of answers I can give. So one, you play this video back and listen to what Leslie said, because I think she talked about it a little bit, right? So first, I'll say this. This is what Twitter figured out. People want to be identified in a certain way, right? Like Twitter allows people to sort of own their identity and own their thoughts in a way that helps them to build sort of relationships independent or not constrained by geography. That's one of many things that I can say positively about Twitter. And the correlation to mentor spaces is that people want to be thought of as being helpful to other people. And if 5 people in your 10-person friend group are actively mentoring in a way that's public and it's being noticed, that's a lot of pressure for you to be on board. So that's kind of a deeper sort of philosophical point, right? That may or may not work for most people. The second point is that the service that we offer mentors is we're protecting time, or protecting your time and your calendar. You heard Leslie say, "Oh, I don't have the bandwidth," right? But part of our process, and this is, she actually helped us realize this, is that we have to build ways to understand what someone's commitment is, no matter how little or how big it is. I mentioned our unit of measure is a conversation. Everybody got time for a conversation. It's like, just talk about shit about other people and help somebody. Do it one time, it can be beneficial, right? So really understanding that we protect someone's time and their availability so that they are having high quality conversations with people is another benefit. Another benefit is the fact, this bi-directional thing I mentioned before. So if you are being poured into by someone else, you're compelled to kind of do it to someone else. So for example, my mentors, quite honestly, are my investors saying, okay, Chris, this is how you should think about your pricing model selling into enterprise, right? I'm the mentee in this case, but I can also be the mentor of people just starting out of like, how do I take this idea and just get a minimal viable product? Or how do I go and recruit that first engineer? And so the fact that you can be poured into while pouring into others is another very key component of incentives. And then on a very like real level, Linda, and I love this question, you can help develop this if you want, but like I'll just tell you, we can pay you. I'll just say it like that, right? And this is basically how it works. A lot of companies are not very diverse at mid-level and above. And the reason why is because they don't have enough Black people to tap into Black networks. But what if, you have a whole industry that's worth, I don't know, $50 billion, something like that, that's all contingency recruiting. And all these contingency recruiters do is they all get on LinkedIn and they get in our emails and they DM us and all this stuff to leverage our networks to place people into a job and get paid $30,000 for doing nothing, but being a power user of social media applications. So what if we accomplish the goal and we, in fact, become the largest mentorship community for Black, brown, and Black early career professionals? Now, a company would say, Chris, we would love to get a new director of marketing. You're like, oh, great. I'm going to incentivize my community of mentors to recommend their friends or recommend themselves. And if your friend gets an interview, I'll pay you $1,000. If your friend gets a job, I'll pay you $3,000. If the company pays me $30,000, I made 27 grand in gross margins almost, right? So there are all of these ways to provide more incentives. But I will say this, and this is just something that I think could be helpful, is that I learned that you can't, especially among Black folks like ourselves, you can't make things transactional. We've been getting taken advantage of for so long. We can see it a mile away. And so it's very intentional to focus in on something that's not transactional and something that's continuous, because you can always add some of those things like, again, referral bonuses and all sorts of things for people to increase stickiness and engagement. And then the final point is, which is probably the most important point, because it's a really important question, but as every product creator or entrepreneur has to understand, there are people that you don't want a part of your stuff, right? Just like if you own the business or you work in a company, there are probably people on your team who you don't think should be there. And that's good, that's healthy. And so we do have to sort of, I think about this a lot. How do we build this community with the right type of people that repels the wrong type of people, right? And that's, and look at Clubhouse, not knocking them. It's interesting for the first like 3 days, but it attracted a lot of the wrong people. and it is not sustainable, for my humble opinion. And so I'm not saying we're going to be really successful, but I'm saying that we're trying to be thoughtful about these issues, because, communities are super strong, but they can also be negative, and it's like a march on capital, or somewhat of a positive, and it's a run up in GameStop stock price, right? So the community attributes and things like that are super, super important. And I love that question, Lyndon. If you have ideas about what would incentivize you, let me know. We may just build it.
I just want to add to that real quick. And also I want to do a time check. We're not ending at 7:30. How are we able to do more questions?
Yeah, we could do 2 more questions. Okay. We started a little bit later than normal.
Okay, cool. I just want to add to what Chris was saying, because this came up with a client of mine today, in fact. And what he said is that it's actually professional development both ways. So with his credentials, He's required to do this sort of thing. And so for him, this would actually add to bettering his credentials as well. So there's incentive for him to do that as well anyway. So why not get back to community while he's doing it?
Right.
Yeah, and measuring all of that.
Exactly.
Did you really mentor people? Oh, check the Elementor place. They track everything. You know, sort of like your credit
Which
score,
is
your mentor
brilliant.
score.
All right, next question. And I might jump over, Melsha, I'm going to come back to you because I feel like this is a good segue into Candice's question. Can you talk more about the similarity or difference between mentor spaces in LinkedIn and Clubhouse as a social media platform? And you touched on it a little bit when you were talking about
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many ways I can answer this question, but, you know, LinkedIn is a network. It's not a community. And you know, the purpose of LinkedIn, and I think this is still true to this day. I mean, it's elevated a little bit, but the purpose of LinkedIn is basically your online resume, right? And they just extend that out. Now it's not just your online resume, it is the place in which you promote all the good things you do, hoping that some recruiter will find you. Just a better resume, right? Not knocking what they do, by the way, but it's, you know, it's this whole concept of a very purpose-built thing, right? Facebook was before LinkedIn. And when LinkedIn just started, they were like, I remember this because, you know, I was around, and they were just like, oh, it's the professional version of Facebook. And that one difference changed everything. It's a whole different business, right? And people say, oh, well, this new app, Twitter. Why would you do that? How is it like? It's just like LinkedIn and Facebook, but it's very nuanced things. Oh, no, this is like the global town square of sharing ideas and things like that. Now, could you have done the same thing on Facebook? Of course. Could you have done the same thing on LinkedIn? Totally. But when you're purpose built for something, there are nuances, many of which I've shared right today, that if anybody tried to copy them, they'll just go bankrupt, which make me feel better. Because these nuances aren't simple things. They come from a lot of experience, right? So anyway, my point is community and the focus on mentorship. If you say your focus is on mentorship and you say your unit of measure is a conversation, and our goal and our team's goal is to create the conditions by which to have a high quality conversation, every decision you make about that product is different, right? If somebody starts self-promoting on mentor spaces, I will kick them out. Literally, right? Like that's not what it's for, right? This is about development. Nobody goes to LinkedIn to develop as an individual or help to develop others. And again, it really determines every single decision you make. And that's why you have not one company that dominates in a particular thing. It's like a family of companies, right? By the way, let's think back to you know, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like he bought Instagram for whatever. I mean, I think that was $1 billion, whatever it was. Then he bought WhatsApp for 18 billion, whatever it was. There were huge amounts of money, and people didn't understand what he was doing. But as an engineer who understands that as an engineer, you build things for very specific purposes, I'm sure that in his estimation, he's like, well, they built this for this very specific thing. It's just sharing pictures and experiences. Well, we're just going to buy that. Why would we sully what we're doing that's working to do that, right? It would have made the Instagram people very, very happy. And maybe it would have switched around. Instagram would have bought Facebook. But we all know the story, right? And so it's interesting. If you look at the 5 most used apps, they're all owned by Facebook. It's ridiculous.
Right.
but it wasn't because Facebook built each of those apps. They recognized that they did something very unique and very distinguished, and they dominated in that one thing. So just something to think about as you from an entrepreneurial perspective and building products, that there are reasons the world looks the way it looks right now. And I just try to get really curious about what those drivers are and see what I can learn and how we build mentor spaces.
Ooh, that leads to kind of my last question here. Where are you trying to take mentor spaces in the next year, 5 years and beyond? Would you sell to Facebook?
Well, first of all, companies get bought, not sold.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Right. So like,
thanks for that correction.
Thinking about that question, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, a lot of things have to go right to even have that option, but it would be a great option, because the goal is, you know, well, we have lots of goals, but, you know, creating generational wealth to be able, I'll just say it like this. Black folks who are smart like really smart, not just think who they're smart, like really smart. Because companies aren't very, very diverse, you can be really smart, but not be really good in what you do and still make $250,000 at one of these large companies. But let's think about what's happening there. You're not going to pursue your idea. That can be much more than what you can make in 10 years at that company. So my point is, people ask me this all the time. They're like, Chris, you left Goldman Sachs? And I'm like, I didn't forget how to trade, bro. Like, I'm just trying something out. Like, I made enough money, I had to work for 2 years, right? And I'm like, well, why just increase my indentured servitude? No, I'm gonna take this money, I'm gonna figure out if I could do something. And if I fail, we'll just go back and trade something else. And it's a super important point because the opportunity cost for very talented Black and brown folks is super high, at least on the surface, is super high. And the opportunity is selling that opportunity cost and investing in yourself. So I say this to say it's no different than like the NBA players or the high school players going to the NBA. If there was an opportunity to exit that created sort of FU money and allowed me to continue to build businesses over and over and over again, well, I would do that all day long, right? So it's the same. I didn't forget all the things that I learned in building mentor spaces, right? You just go and do something that's similar. It's like the Instagram version of it, right? If this is the Facebook version, what's the Instagram version? Or what's the WhatsApp version? Or what's the Twitter version, right? But to answer the question directly, you know, in 5 years, you know, we want to be the leading mentorship platform in the world, and period. And there is something also really important, and what I'm expressing is, again, a person can't be who they haven't seen. And why couldn't this company be $1 billion company? Why would I have that imposter syndrome? As long as I don't forget about the community, right? That's the key point here, right? I'm hiring people like crazy. Well, Maisha share jobs. We want perspectives, right? But the point is that as long as I don't forget about what will create value, then there's never a reason to sell, right? I mean, you just make a lot of money and you start other businesses or you buy other businesses and you grow your footprint to continue to move closer to this aspirational vision that we have, which is advancing the careers of underrepresented talent through the power of mentorship. Maybe I just subtract out the power of mentorship and say advancing the careers of underrepresented talent. Think about that. How many other ideas could we generate on this call in like 30 seconds if I just limited to advancing the careers of underrepresented talent? If Disney said, you know, we are like a children's movie company, it's a different business. If Disney says we're a children's entertainment company, it's what we know today, right? And then when they stretch it and say we're an entertainment company, right? And so they have this very creative genius in making these kids movies that mean something to the adults, that mean something completely different to the kids. I mean, it's insane what they've been able to do. So my point is that, you know, having a big vision is super important. And I have to say, like, you know, it's really hard for me, given all the things that I've done up to this point, not to have that imposter syndrome. But I have to remember that, like, there were times where I had like $3, 10 people and $3 in the bank account and have to do payrolls in 4 days, right? And it's no different. You all appreciate this. I'm with family. It's no different than being in the hood. You like go to your grandmama, you go to your uncle, you go to like, hey, let me just, as my family tells me, let me hold on to $10. let me hold this for you, right? It's the same thing. You know, it's just investors and they have commas, you know, in their net worth. And I'm like, I don't think hold it. I was like, I need a 2-week access to capital for $25,000. It's like, it's a funny story. When you raise money, you have to disclose to investors if you have debts to all your debts, but they tend to put parameters on it. So if you owe someone more, let's say $25,000 or more than $50,000, you have to disclose it to investors, because if you obviously owe a lot of money, they put money in you, that's a lot of risk. So this wasn't the last fundraiser I did, but the 2 fundraisers ago, like, we ran out of money. We literally ran out of money. And so I went to existing investors and I said, Chris, how much you need? I said, I need $150,000. He said, I'll give you $150,000 for 2 weeks. I said, no. give me 24,500. I got other people to ask because I didn't want to have to report it. So I just went by investor, didn't have to disclose it. And what's funny about it, it's just, this is so funny. So we raised the money. It was, first of all, I was so happy paying off bills. That was number one. Like, when you have money to pay bills, that makes you feel good. But number two, some of my investors like, Chris, I just appreciate the way you've navigated this. I won't even charge you interest. It was like 2 weeks, but they will charge you 2 weeks at whatever the rate is, but he's like, I'll just, and he wanted me to say thank you, which I should have, and I did, because it's super important. But anyway, my point is that the same issues happen whether you are running a company that's raised $10 million or you in the hood trying to figure out how you have dinner. It's the same. It's the same thought process. And I say this because there's no reason to have freaking imposter syndrome, right? Like, we innovate everything, right? We just tend to innovate for our survival. And when you get past that and you think in your lens is much bigger, and not the survival of yourself or the survival of your family, but the survival and the competitiveness of your people. Because you're not happy if you're by yourself. I won't name really rich Black folks, but some of them, they're not really happy because they lost sight of the community. So anyway, I'm getting on another soapbox. There's another album for you, Maisha.
That's volume number 5. I counted. Volume 5. So okay.
But it's real talk though. It's real talk though. That imposter syndrome thing is such a big deal, and so I'm starting to get super passionate about it in terms of identifying the assets that we all have, and quite honestly, it's this community. And like the questions that have come out, the things that Candice has shared and Leslie's has shared and Maisha and other people, like, we have the money to invest in making all this stuff better, to innovate. Mm-hmm. And that's a very good position to be in. You just have to have a decision-making process to understand which things to pursue and which things to give the Heisman to.
Love it.
Is it okay to share this recording with my clients? I mean, they would be like, totally, yes, sign me up right now.
Yes, it'll be shared right after. So yes, you can share it. Yes, you can. All right. So Chris, I'm like, this is like the best. And I'm like holding people over time, and I'm grateful for everybody who stayed over time, quite honestly, because you guys are just getting all the great gems that Chris is dropping as part of his album. But then, I mean, there's so much here with Mentor Spaces, and we're so happy that we're going to be a pilot for Mentor Spaces with our chapter. You guys,
y'all more than a pilot. Soon. Y'all gonna be doing some design work.
I'm loving every minute. I'm gonna give
you my roadmap.
I'm loving every minute. Seriously.
We're part of the team. We're part of the team. Shout out to Kunal and Randy. We are super grateful. Like, this is, like we said, we all love your app. We do. And so when National dropped it on us, and Leslie was like, wait a minute, you want me to connect you with them? I was like, of course. And so when we connected, it was just like a natural thing.
I know the pain of setting up a mentorship program. And this is like, oh my God, you can save so much time. It's already there for you. Yeah. It does all the heavy lifting. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this. Some albums aren't that good. And because you know what you're capable of, and you know what your team is capable of. And so I'm okay with how things are right now, but what I've seen from what the team has brought back and what I'm learning, what we are capable of is like 100x of what you see right now. And not to say what you see right now is bad, but I'm just saying that there are there's treasures in my mind. I just can't open up my own vault.
It's okay. I'm gonna say it's like Will Smith when he had these great movies, and then he came out with Wild Wild West, and then back to this great movie again. So it's kind of like that. There's levels to things, so it's totally fine.
Well, it's levels to things, and you definitely the more exposed you are, the better you can innovate. That's honestly the only, when I learn things from people who we've hired and people we will be hiring, they just tell you things you just weren't exposed to. And then it gives you a whole other level to operate on. And so that's really what makes this partnership so important, because you guys are certainly stretching my thinking, the thinking of the team, to, put us on another level of operation. So, and it to be mutually beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
So awesome job, you guys, as well.
Well, thank you. Kudos to the team. So like we said, there's open roles. Who should they reach out to for more information besides me and our chapter? Who else should they reach out to for more information?
Let's put it on Randy. So I'm gonna have a fill up his inbox. It's just Randy, RANDY, at mentorspaces.com. Don't forget the S in back of spaces. But no, we have like I think 7 or 8 roles we need to fill, and we really want our team to be diverse and representative of the community we're trying to serve, but also be experts. And Randy is the mentorship expert, and that a lot of his thoughts and ideas are also expressed in what we do. So that's where we start. But Maisha, you'll help with this as well to get the distribution of the opportunities.
Of course, I'm ready to send them out. I was waiting for tonight. I'm ready. So of course, we're going to send out the job opportunities there. They'll be posted on our website as well. You'll see some in our newsletter. So make sure that if you are interested and you want to have a conversation first, like you said, reach out to Randy at mentorspaces.com. Randy put his email in the chat box. Thank you, Randy, so much. And before we close, I do want to thank everybody for joining us for this wonderful, wonderful chat with Chris. I can't thank you enough. Like, you guys are on the East Coast Central Time, so you guys are up later than us. And so I appreciate you taking time to do this. And so
they could have been on Clubhouse.
Yeah, that is true. I'm on there. I've just never been into a room. So it's like, yeah, it's just not my thing. Like you said, it's certain audiences, and I can't get into it. So, but this is my thing. So if you guys are interested in becoming members of our chapter or just members of the National Black MBA at all, just at large, join us next Tuesday, August 3rd. We're going to have a member meeting, and LaPrae George from National and Robin Edwards from National are going to come on that call to just go over some new benefits that they dropped this year. We're going back to the drops, like we're on albums, that National dropped this year, including Gold Key Access, so the renewal of Gold Key Access if you're 10 years or more with professional experience. The Members Perks Program, which is a new program that you get discounts, like travel discounts, all these great discounts that they have going on in your local area. And LaPrae will talk more about conference, so the in-person conference and the virtual conference and what the difference is between the two. So make sure you join us next Tuesday for that meeting. And I'm excited about the next one coming up too. We're going to have a men's panel. If you were with us earlier this year in March, we did a women's panel on executive presence. And so now we're doing the Authentic Leadership men's panel. And so that's going to come up August 10th at 6 p.m. So make sure you register online for that. If you did not receive the email today, just email me at president@sfnbmbaa.org, and we'll add you to the mailing list so you can get the information. And we also have our annual summer soiree coming up. And so that's to save the date, August 1st, you'll see more information. So make sure you get on our mailing list so you can get this information. And from now until the end of August, we're giving 20% off of San Francisco Bay Area chapter membership. So if you're interested in becoming a member, now's the time. You get 20% off of any membership. So that's any membership from undergrad, grad, all the way up to experienced professional. Annual membership is 20% off the whole year. If you do the monthly membership, that's only 20% off the first month. So just keep that in mind. So if you're interested in joining our chapter, make sure you go over to the national website, nbmbaa.org/join MBMBAA to fill out a membership application and join our chapter. And that is all my
hang on, I have one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Maisha, do we want to say something about if people are interested in joining the mentorship program? They want to be a mentor. Oh,
that was my next. That's all. Oh. That's all my sales pitching for membership.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Thank you, Stacy. I hope to see you in Chicago too. And so coming up in our, again, subscribe to our newsletter, because coming up, you will get, everybody who's attended this actual session will get an email asking if they would like to be a mentor for our space. So again, our chapter is launching a pilot with Mentor Spaces. So we'll have our own San Francisco space. And if you want to become a mentor for our chapter, we would love to have you. There's an application process. You will go through the application process. You get selected, you go through training with Randy and Kunal, and you never know, Chris might jump on that training too, drop some more gems. But you get to go through that session to learn what it's like to be a mentor and what we're actually looking for to be a mentor. Leslie, you want to add any more there?
No, just a thank you to all the participants. Candice for chiming in with your experience. Chris, you're just awesome. I mean, I love the story behind Mentor Spaces. I love your advocacy for our people. You've given me something to think about with regard to entrepreneurship, and even, I mean, you're an inspiration. So thank you very much for being here tonight.